This is super interesting and maybe not completely surprising to you. White House data has now leaked, which shows that the White House knows that infections are spiking in rural Trump voting areas while they continue to decline in some of those early hit, disproportionately urban blue voting areas. And the growing political divide that has long permeated the country when it comes to attitudes towards coronavirus. As we know, Democrats much more likely to be taking the virus seriously than Republicans. Democrats much more likely to be staying at home than Republicans. Democrats much more likely to be wearing masks than Republicans. That now, which has been a political divide for some time, is being reflected in the case and death growth rates. Now, the Trumpists will say, listen, most of the deaths are still in blue areas, these liberal cities like New York City and the surrounding New Jersey towns and cities, Chicago, Detroit, Boston. Now, of course, those places also have in common that they are very dense cities with huge numbers of direct flights to and from China and Europe. So that explains why those places were early hubs and why they were places with significant infection early before we had any testing and before we knew much about the prevalence and the spread of coronavirus. But in terms of percentages, which is really where you have to look if you want to evaluate a virus, it's called viral spread for a reason. We are now seeing that most of those early hotspots on a percentage basis are actually on a decline, whereas some of the fastest growth rate spots are, for example, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. Now, just to put some numbers to it, check out the case growth rates yesterday. These are not raw numbers. What you want to look at is the rate of growth, which is a trajectory, okay? You look at yesterday, Tennessee, Virginia, Texas, Georgia, and Florida all had dramatically larger case growth rates than Massachusetts and New York. Massachusetts right at 1%, New York at 0.43%. Tennessee, 3.5% growth rate yesterday. And so what you have to understand is that over time, the raw numbers are going to spike. You look at Tennessee in cases and you might say, oh, okay, well, they went from, 600 to 650 cases. But if that rate continues, it becomes a huge hotspot very, very quickly. So that gets us to this leaked data. The White House has a number of slides which have leaked that show that this is a trend the White House is aware of. You've got rates decreasing in 14 states, rates increasing in 9 states, but 27 states don't even have enough testing yet that we can say for sure that all of the cases are even close to being counted accurately. But here's where it gets really interesting. The state level data may not really be enough to underscore this. Dr. Birx and others for a while now have been saying, we really need to look at counties. You need to look at counties to see what's going on. That helps us separate urban versus rural. It helps us separate parts of states from each other. It turns out that when you look at the county level, the biggest spikes are happening in rural Trump voting counties in places like Kansas and Tennessee. Some of those places have seen case growth rates of more than 1,000% in a single week. There are rural Trump counties in Missouri, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, which lean heavily Trump. The counties do, where cases have grown 400%. All but one of the top 10 growth counties in the last week were Trump counties in 2016. Dr. John Ross, who's a professor at Harvard Medical School, tweeted about this saying, quote, "The fastest rising areas in the U.S. for COVID cases are very white and very Trumpy, according to this slide somebody leaked to NBC News." This is why I do not believe that Trump's strategy of just normalizing the deaths and pretending we've won is going to work. It could work for some time. There's no question about it, because right now the growth rates are very high in a lot of these Trump counties, but the raw numbers are still small. If you go from 100 to 200 new cases per day, it's a 100% increase, but it's still only 200 cases. It's not going to get as much attention, particularly when a lot of times people are sorting the data by most new cases today, which will favor states with larger populations and states with early infections. But if then you go from 200 new cases a day to 400 to 800 to 1600, and then cumulatively, you're talking about a huge number of infections. So what that says to me is the Trump strategy of saying we won, we've prevailed, we're on the decline, we've got testing, we've got everything, the economy's going to reopen, third quarter will be transitional, fourth quarter is going to be amazing, 2021 is going to be the best in history, this type of stuff. It ignores that if these growth rates continue another 30 days, and we said this 10 days ago, and now a lot of these states are the leaders in growth rate, if it's another 30 days of this, you are going to have very red states that presumably local news is still going to report on cases and deaths. National news is going to point to these states as the new hotspots. I don't believe that it is viable for Trump to simply pretend everything is fine until November, if indeed these places continue spiking. Also interesting, somebody leaked this data. That means that someone inside the White House and inside or close to the task force, I don't mean like Dr. Birx, but there's so much staff that's associated. They probably decided to leak this because they realized they need to because of what the public position of Trump has been. You see Trump go out and say cases are going down everywhere. And then inside the task force, they have slides which say that's not true. And the places where it's growing the fastest are mostly Trump counties. You've got Fox News broadcasting, it's time to go and open and get back to work. But a ton of their employees are still working from home. What's being said publicly is not matching up with the policies that a lot of places are putting in place. Trump continues to say, we don't need to worry about testing and tracing. Things are good to go. Everything's going down. And yet the White House over the last 72 hours has put in place a mandatory mask policy and daily testing for more and more people, other than Trump and Pence. Of course, they're not wearing masks. So they are very clearly saying one thing and doing something very different when it comes to the policy behind the scenes. Meantime, I am very pleased to see that here in Massachusetts, we had very small case growth rate for about the last 10 days. Deaths yesterday were at their lowest since April 4th, which is about 40 days ago. Lowest deaths in 40 days was yesterday in Massachusetts. That's really, really good to see. And we're expecting some new guidance probably in the next 48 hours from Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, who's not been perfect. He's been late on a bunch of stuff, but he's been far earlier than more than half of the country's governors. We'll see what continues to happen in the early infection blue states like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, Illinois. And then we're going to be able to compare and contrast that with places that never really closed at the state level. Cities may have done things and that have been very quick to reopen. We're going to know in the next 20 or 30 days exactly what the repercussions of that are. Early data are that it's not going to be particularly pretty. One of our sponsors today is Vincero Watches, giving you 15% off your entire order when you go to davidpakman.com/watch. Don't pay thousands of dollars for a high quality watch that looks great because you don't have to. All of Vincero's watches are made with high-end materials, masterfully built, and they look like something you'd spend a ton of money on. But every Vincero watch ranges from about $150 to $300. I went over to their website and picked out the Bellwether in silver and white. Really nice, elegant look. And a lot of people ask me, where's the watch from? Really, really great look. Totally different. They also sent me the Altitude in matte black and red, a much more rugged view of what a watch can look like. Really like it as well as the athletic strap. It's a new year. It's a new decade. It's time to reestablish your style, add something new to your look. And a high quality watch is the perfect way to do that. You can get 15% off Vincero's entire collection when you go to davidpakman.com/watch.